Good morning and welcome everybody. It is a rainy, wonderful morning in the Pacific Northwest. We are here with Nancy Pearl today. The Friends of the Langley Library is proud to be hosting this or sponsoring this event today. It is a Snow Isle event. We apologize for the technical difficulties. Hopefully we will get the PowerPoint going here in just a minute. The Friends have hosted Nancy Pearl every year since 1998. This is our 24th year. And even on Zoom, this is a highly anticipated event. We gather every year to hear Nancy's unique insights about her favorite books of the year. Nancy's love of reading and libraries started when she was a young girl, and she knew by age 10 that she wanted to be a librarian. And I'm so glad she did. She comes to us today with her unique and extensive experience as a librarian, a literary critic, a best-selling author, and host of the show Booklust on cable TV and YouTube. She created the community reading program now known as Seattle Reads, which has been replicated in all 50 states and around the world. Nancy has been given numerous awards. In fact, next week, the National Book Foundation will be presenting Nancy with the 2021 Literarian Award for Outstanding Service to the American literary community. It is awarded for a lifetime of achievement in expanding the audience for books and reading. And because the ceremony is online, Nancy has invited us to attend. It is November 17th, and we are going to put the link in the chat, and Vicki and I will both share that on Facebook. And I can't think of a more deserving recipient than Nancy. So Nancy, on behalf of all of us, congratulations on this amazing recognition of your life's work. Just a few housekeeping items. Everybody's microphones are muted, and we are recording this, and it will be available in a few days or a week. And let me see, there's also a closed captioning setting on your on Zoom if you're interested in that. And I believe that is all the housekeeping. So thank you all for being here, and thank you, Nancy, for joining us. We are so excited that you're here today.
Jill, it's great to be here again. I know we really all wanted this to be in person. I know I certainly did, because I always look forward to coming there, even though I think 20 of the last 24 years of my trips to Langley, it has rained. So it's only fitting that it's raining today. I have some great books on this list, and I think that I'll just get started. All of these books, when we pick a date for me to come to Langley to do this program, and I have to give the people a list of the books, I just sit down and, I make a list of books that I've enjoyed, and they're kind of hither and yon. I don't see any overarching order to them. And then when I get down to really talking about them, I see that there are things that these books have in common. So I think you'll be able to see the kind of reading that I've done in the last year. The first book that I want to talk about is a memoir. And those of you who have heard me for the last number of years know that I am not someone who is a total fan of memoirs. When I'm feeling a little snarky, I call them memoirs, because they're all about me. But occasionally I run across a memoir that I really, really enjoy. And what those memoirs have in common are that they're more than just about the author. They give us a broader kind of view. One of those memoirs that I absolutely loved and I talked about the year it came out is Terry Tempest Williams' wonderful memoir called Refuge. So if you haven't read that, it's kind of an eco memoir set around the Great Salt Lake. And this first book that I want to tell you about is by Kendra Atlee-Work, and it's called Miracle Country. And it too is an eco memoir. If you think that last name Atlee work is kind of weird, that was the name of one of her parents' last name was Atlee, and one of her parents' last name was Work. And when they got together, they just combined them to give the family that last name. Kendra Atlee Work grew up in Bishop, California. And Bishop, California is in the high Sierras, the desert part of California, in Owens Valley, in the eastern Sierras. The annual rainfall in Owens Valley is 5 inches. And yet Owens Valley was at one time a thriving farm community. And then all of that water went, I bet you can guess where, went to Los Angeles for their water, for which we can thank William Mulholland. So this is a memoir about place, it's a memoir about a family, and it's a memoir about what I believe is probably going to be the next big issue that our country has to face, and that is water. And how we manage water. So that's Miracle Country, absolutely wonderful, so readable. Kendra Atlee Work is just a lovely, lovely writer. The next book on the list is maybe the best book that I have read in a couple of years, best in the sense of making me think. It's called Having and Being Had, and it's by a writer named Eula Biss. B-I-S-S. Eula Biss is a poet and now a nonfiction writer. She and her husband live in Chicago, and they are adjunct teachers at various Chicago universities and colleges. Having and Being Had is nonfiction. It's a series of short essays. And what Eula Biss has done in this book is she's writing about her exploration of capitalism, of privilege, of money, of class. In each of these short essays, there's something that I found. I mean, I usually don't underline in nonfiction. You know, when I underline at all, I underline in my fiction reading, because there are these great sentences that I want to remember and put in my day book, my notebook, where I keep all those favorite quotes. But there was something on almost every page of Having and Being Had that I felt was so important that I wanted to keep track of it. And here's one of those sentences. Here's where she's talking to an economist, and she's asking him about if he could explain capitalism to her. And this is what he says. Oil and coal are capital, and we need to leave that capital in the ground. We shouldn't mine it, sell it, buy it, or burn it. But people already own that capital. The last time the US, we walked away from an accumulation of capital this significant was emancipation. Now, what a way to think about, what an interesting, unusual for me. I'd never heard that way of thinking about what emancipation, an understanding of emancipation in terms of capital. And yet here it is in this book. And there's just thought-provoking things on every single page. I think it would make a great book for a book discussion, for a book discussion group. Eula Biss started writing this book, Having and Being Had, when she and her husband bought their first washing machine, and what that washing machine meant in their life, that whole not having to go to a laundromat, not having to sit there while the clothes are washing and drying, all that, and that led her into a consideration of all of these things that she's writing about. Oh my, it was just amazing. I love this book. The next book, excuse me, is a British mystery. I am a total Anglophile, and I loved this series of mysteries. It's an older title, And it's the first, well, these books don't need to be read in order, but this is one of my favorites, and it's an early one by a man named Edmund Crispin, and it's called The Moving Toy Shop. And if you've spent any time, if you visited Oxford and spent any time there, I think you'll just love this book, because it is set in Oxford, and much of it revolves around the main character in this book is an Oxford Don, a professor of literature and language named Gervase Fenn. And he is the hero, if you will, of all of the novels, the 8 or 9 novels by Edmund Crispin. In this book, a poet is coming up to Oxford from London to take a few days off, and he gets there very late at night, and he's trying to find a place where he can stay. And he sees a light on in a toy shop, and he goes in, and the next thing he knows, actually, he wakes up the next morning. The toy shop has disappeared, and he is stumped as to what happened, because one of the things that he remembers is that there's a dead body that was in the toy shop. He goes to the police come and investigate. They can find no sign of a toy shop. In fact, it is now a grocery store, and there's no dead body. This is a mystery that is humorous. There are places in this mystery where the narrator breaks the fourth wall and talks directly to us as the readers. They're kind of side comments. Edmund Crispin was at Oxford the same time that the poet Philip Larkin was. And there's a reference to Philip Larkin that you can pick up when you read this book. I just absolutely love these mysteries. If you love The Moving Toy Shop as much as I did, or if you can't get that particular one, you might want to pick up my other favorite, which is called The Case of the Gilded Fly. So that is Edmund Crispin. The next series, the next book is another British series, but totally different than Edmund Crispin's. They're a series by Peter Granger, and they begin with a book called, here it is on screen, An Accidental Death. The main character is a detective sergeant named D.C. Smith. And this takes place in the north of England around Norwich. And so you really get a sense of the place where it's set. It's a police procedural. So you're with all of these policemen who are working out of one particular building, solving crimes in their area. This does not have Scotland Yard in it at all. I listened to all of these books and just found them so interesting because of the characters. Now, the plots are quite good too. And An Accidental Death it is not going to have, I mean, I could never solve the crime before D.C. Smith and and the other policemen that he works with could solve it. But I certainly enjoyed every single one of these books. So I hope you can get them. I hope you can listen to them. They're pretty great. The next book is another nonfiction book written by a Seattle writer named Blaine Harden, who has written several other books, many of them set in North Korea. But this book is a book I think that everybody in Washington might want to read. And I think it would be actually a very good book for a Whatcom County, Snow Isle reads. I was just in Whatcom County doing this talk the other day. So Murder at the Mission, A Frontier Killing, Its Legacy of Lies, and the Taking of the American West. Now, when I was growing up, I read, I think as many of you probably have, I read a series of biographies, childhood of the famous Americans. They had orange covers in those days. I believe they now have blue covers, the paperback editions. The ones I read were hardback, and well worn because kids loved them. And one of the characters, one of the people in those biographies was Narcissa Whitman. And I was even, I have a master's degree in history now, but even then I loved historical novels and reading about people who lived in different times than I lived. So Blaine Harden, so Narcissa Whitman, I mean, I really grew up thinking that she and her husband were just so wonderful. And, you know, her husband was a missionary. He and Narcissa came west. They settled in what is now Walla Walla, Washington. And they opened a mission where, of course, they were going to convert the Indians, Native Americans who lived there. So remember, I was 8 years old when I loved Narcissa Whitman, but I didn't know the full story of Narcissa and Marcus Whitman until I read this book. And I actually remember when I first moved to Washington about 30 years ago, I was in Walla Walla doing a presentation, and they took me into, the host took me to the mission, and you could actually see the wagon wheel ruts where the wagons were when Narcissa and Marcus lived there. But this is a book about demythologizing, especially Marcus Whitman. And when you finish reading this book, I think that you will probably have the same reaction that I had, which was probably Whitman College ought to change its name, and that hotel in Walla Walla, the big Marcus Whitman Hotel, maybe they ought to change that name too, because the story that has come down to us about Marcus and Narcissa Whitman is pretty much made out of hopefulness and a desire to uplift somebody, in this case, Marcus Whitman, and turn him into a hero when in fact he and Narcissa were not heroes. And that story was first created by a frenemy of the Whitmans, who had set up his own mission in Oregon. This is one of those narrative history books that's so readable, and it's really a page turner. And it not only really reflects what happened to Marcus and Narcissa Whitman, it's so relevant to everything that's happening today. So don't miss Blaine Harden's Murder at the Mission. Now, the next book is maybe my favorite work of fiction of the last couple of years. It has a great cover, A Shadow Intelligence by Oliver Harris. I discovered this book in a kind of odd way. The publisher sent me a copy of a new book by a writer I had never heard of, a man named Oliver Harris. The book was called Ascension, and I read it, and it was about a spy, and I love spy novels. I love John le Carré's spy novels, but Ascension was about a spy, a member of MI6, the Foreign Intelligence oversight part of British government, a spy named Elliot Kane. And I thought it was great. I mean, I was talking about it to everybody. Oh, Ascension is so good. I put it on Twitter, how much I liked it. And then someone said, well, if you loved Ascension, did you read the first book about Oliver Kane, which is called A Shadow Intelligence? And no, in fact, I had not read that. So I got it out of the library, and oh my gosh, those were such good days when I was reading A Shadow Intelligence. This is the book that introduces Elliot Kane. And in this book, he learns that an old lover of his has disappeared in Kazakhstan. And he decides he's going to go a little rogue and go to Kazakhstan and discover what happened to her. If you like John le Carré's novels, I think this is the book for you, because it's a book like John le Carré that feels so real, that feels as though, oh yes, this is how MI6 operatives work. And it updates John le Carré's writing, because his major books were in the 80s and 90s, A Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, even a little earlier than that. This is a book that shows how all of the technology that has been put into practice, how it's being used by both the good guys and the bad guys in this case. So there's a lot about the dark web. There's a lot about using cell phones to track people, all of that. And even probably the best thing, the reason that I loved this book so much, is how well written it is. And here's a paragraph, a brief paragraph that I think will give you an idea of the book. The Foreign Office cannot bear too much reality. When you travel between a world of reports and the one that people die in, intelligence product becomes a dubious thing. You impose order on chaos. You give other people a false sense of understanding and authority. It involves the transformation of friends and brothers into agents or targets. That was the border crossing that eventually exhausted you. Isn't that wonderful? I mean, here's another sentence. This is mankind's eternal quest, I'd argued, to protect ourselves from chance. Oh my gosh, I could just go on and read quotes from here all day. They're just so, it's such a wonderful book. Read this book, a perfect book for presents for people who, and yourself, who love spy novels. Okay, the next book on the list is called Leonard and Hungry Paul by an Irish writer, a youngish Irish writer named Ronan Hession. Leonard and Hungry Paul is the, you remember a few years ago, there was a nonfiction book by Susan Cain called Quiet, like how to be an introvert in a world where people never stop talking. And this is a book that kind of does in fiction what Quiet did. Now, Leonard and Hungry Paul is a first novel. In another part of his life, Ronan Hession is a singer-songwriter. You can listen to his music on YouTube. He records under the name Mumblin. Let's see, what is his name? Mumblin Road. Oh my gosh, what is his name? Oh yeah, Mumblin Deaf Row is what he records under. I had the opportunity to interview Ronan, because this was the book that Dublin picked for their All Dublin Reads this year. So Leonard and Hungry Paul are two friends in their 30s. They both live with their parents. There's not a lot of plot in this book. Things happen, but it's a quiet book about two men who you might say are on the autism spectrum. And it's a book it's the kind of book that when you finish it, you just want to hug. One of the things I loved about this book is that we are never told why Hungry Paul, who lives with his parents still, as I said, in his 30s, why Hungry Paul is known as Hungry Paul. That's never explained. I love it when authors don't tell us absolutely everything. The book the writing in the book is absolutely lovely. Here's an example of the writing. This is how the book opens. Leonard was raised by his mother alone with cheerfully concealed difficulty. his father having died tragically during childbirth. Though she was not by nature the soldiering type, she taught him to look at life as a daisy chain of small events, each of which could be made manageable in its own way. She was a person for whom kindness was a very ordinary thing, who believed that the only acceptable excuse for not having a bird feeder in the back garden was that you had one in the front garden. Now, one of the things that happens in this book is that Hungry Paul enters a contest, and the contest is to come up with the best way to finish emails, the last line of an email. And that's always such a problem. Do you say best regards? Do you say, for a while I said, stay well and keep safe, or best wishes? How do you end those emails? So there was this big contest, and Hungry Paul wins the contest with this ending to emails. And the ending is that he has come up with is, "You may wish to note the above," and then signing his name. I loved that. The next book is very different, and that's what I love about reading, that you can always find different kinds of books. Mitz, the Marmoset of Bloomsbury. You might know the name Sigrid Nunez because she won, I think, the National Book Award or the Book Critics Circle Award for a book last year called The Friend. But this is a very different book. This is a very, very short book. I actually listened to this book and then found a copy and went back and read it. So this is a book, I don't know if you can recognize them from the cover, but this is a book about Leonard and Virginia Woolf. And what Sigrid Nunez did is used letters and diaries. It's almost it's a very brief biography of a very particular aspect of the Woolf's lives, and a biography of this marmoset called Mitz, who came into the life of the most literary intellectual couple in Bloomsbury, and they took Mitz with them everywhere. It really gives you a wonderful look in a way that we haven't seen Virginia Woolf before. And also Bloomsbury writ large, this group of writers and thinkers and painters whose lives were shadowed by two wars, really, by World War I and World War II. I loved this book. This book will probably take you an hour to read, and it will give you, if you're a Virginia Woolf fan, it will give you just a lovely, lovely picture of them. Her husband, Leonard Woolf, has been put in the shadows by Virginia Woolf. And their marriage really always seems to focus on stories of their marriage always seem to focus on Virginia. But Leonard Woolf was such an interesting person and wrote a series of published a series of his journals, his diaries, and his experiences early in the 20th century. And I highly, highly recommend those as well. The next book is a picture book. I wanted to include this book because the author and the illustrator of this book, Julie Pashkis, of course, is a beloved Seattle artist and writer. And this is an oversized book. It's a book that on one side of the page asks a question, and on the other side of the page answers the question within a painting of that book. It would be a terrific present because you could sit down with a child and talk about the questions and the answers that Julie Pashkis offers, in her paintings. So that's the wordy book. The next book that I want to talk about is called Rhododendron Pie. And this is published by a British publisher called Dean Street Press. And they are affiliated with another publishing company called Furrowed Middlebrow Books. I mean, you can't, I love the name of that, Furrowed Middlebrow Books. But what Dean Street Press and Furrowed Middlebrow are doing is reissuing books from really the early 50 years of the 20th century by people that have fallen. The books are long out of print, or people that are unfamiliar with the writers. I have to say, in 2020, basically all I read were books from Dean Street Press. There are mysteries that I had never heard of the authors. I mean, I would, you could, and what I discovered is if the books aren't available in the United States, and some of them aren't, you can order them from Blackwell's Books, and they don't cost any more than they would cost getting them if they were available here. So Marjorie Sharp, you might know the name Marjorie Sharp because she was the author of the Miss Bianca books, The Rescuers. Do you remember that? And I loved those books and always, used them, recommended them when I was a children's librarian, but I didn't know she wrote adult novels as well. And Rhododendron Pie is her first adult novel, her first novel for adults. One of the things that really characterizes these books from Dean Street Press are the absolutely lovely, lovely covers. So Rhododendron Pie was written in 1930. It's a social satire. It's exactly the kind of book that I needed to read in 2020, and I went on and read a ton of other Marjorie Sharp books. If you're a fan of old movies, Marjorie Sharp wrote the book that the movie Clooney Brown is based on. I have to say that I watched that movie, and the book, of course, is better. So almost any of Marjorie Sharp's books are just great. So Rhododendron Pie, written in 1930, it's a social satire. It's a story of a young woman, the youngest in a family of bohemians. And Anne really does not want to be a bohemian. She wants to live in a normal family. She wants, the book is called Rhododendron Pie because for birthdays, rather than having a normal pie, like an apple pie, the mother makes an unusual pie with like flowers in it. And Rhododendron Pie was one of those pies that she made. And Anne realized at that time that she didn't want that. She wanted good old, an apple pie or a peach pie. And this is the story of Anne's coming to terms with who she is. It's great fun. There are very funny lines in this book. One of the things that I most appreciated about this book is that during the pandemic and continuing through now, what I've been doing tons and tons of 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzles. And there's actually a scene in Rhododendron Pie in which Anne is working on a jigsaw puzzle. One of the things about Marjorie Sharp is that she has a liking for her characters, even when she disapproves of them. And, she's willing to see them three-dimensionally, which a lot of writers are not. Here's a nice quote from this book. Anne had never really appreciated the aesthetic value of melancholy. Isn't that great? I loved that. The next book on the list was it was published early in 2021. It's called The Great Circle. I'm embarrassed to say, I had never read anything by Maggie Shipstead before. I have no idea why, but I picked up this book. It is going to be on many people's best of 2021 lists. You can see it was chosen as a read with Jenna, some book club that I'm not familiar with. But this book was shortlisted for the Booker Prize, and it's a book that is told in told from the points of view of two different women who live about 100 years apart. The main character is one of the main characters, and really the main character, I think. We meet her when she's born, and we watch her grow up. Marion Graves, at a very young age, decided that what she wanted to do was fly. She wanted to be a pilot, and what she most wanted to do was circumnavigate the globe over the poles. And I went that way, and what she wanted to do was go this way over the poles. And we follow her life as she tries to do that. On the other major person in the book is a young actress who has been hired to play Marion Graves in a biopic, a film that is going to concentrate on the fact that Marion Graves disappeared somewhere into Antarctica and no one knows what's happened to her. So if you like these kind of big books that talk about full lives, this is really the book for you. Okay, I'm going to hurry up so we have time for questions. The next book on the list is a book that I think probably a lot of you have read years ago. It's called August Folly, and it's by Angela Thirkell. I had never read anything by Angela Thirkell. I again discovered her because of the Dean Street Press books, and I fell in love with Angela Thirkell's books. I would suggest, if what you're looking for is an escape into England between the wars and then a little bit after the wars, and you want humor, and you just want kind of comfort books, which I think a lot of us still do at this time, Angela Thirkell's books are the ones for you. I tried as best I could to read them in publication order. That's hard to do because many of them weren't available. I had to send away to England for them, to Blackwell's. But if you just want to start with one book and see whether, see if Angela Thirkell is for you, August Folly, I think, is the one to start with. It really is. I could see it made into kind of a romantic comedy. It's just great fun. Angela Thirkell's book wrote during the 30s, the 40s, and the 50s. The books in the 50s, I would say, were my very least favorite. Some of them I couldn't read at all. And then I learned from a biography that I read of Angela Thirkell, a new biography of Angela Thirkell, that the 50s were not a good time in her life. That kind of made me decide that I wasn't going to read biographies of authors that I had fallen in love with, because I didn't want to know about her life in any way, shape, or form, because I loved those books so much. All the books are set in Barsetshire. That locale might be familiar to you because that's where Anthony Trollope set all of his books as well. Here's just a funny example of Angela Thirkell's writings. The main railroad line at Winter Overcoats serves Shearing Junction, Winter Underclose, and Worsted. Nearby are the towns of Lambton, Fleece, Skeins, and Eiderdown. It's kind of a madcap comedy, and you would think somebody would do a film of this, kind of a period piece. Okay, the next book is by a new writer. This is her first novel, The Final Revival of Opal and Nev. And oh my goodness, what a good book. This should be on people's best of lists as well. Opal and Nev were singers. Opal was in the book, this is fiction. Opal is an African-American woman who grew up in Detroit, and Nev is a British singer who grew up in a small town in England, and they come together to form the first and perhaps only interracial rock duo. The book is told in this really interesting way. The book is told as though it's a biography of the two, of Opal and Nev, and it's told as a series of interviews by a young African-American writer who has a connection to Opal. And Opal and Nev's career ended very suddenly. It ended in a tragedy. And this biographer wants to find out the real story. So again, the writing is just great. And I think it's the kind of book that it would be fun to talk about like, what if it hadn't been written in that way? What if it hadn't been written in this series of short biographies, short interviews? What if it had just been a straight narrative novel about Opal and Nev? What kind of difference would that make? But that's the kind of thing I stay awake thinking about, which I'm sure nobody else does. The next book is just out in paperback, and it would be a perfect gift for anyone who loves wordplay, who loves quirky novels, who loves words, who sometimes pages through the dictionary looking up odd and unusual words. Don't read this book. What you're looking for is a plot, a strong plot, a page turner. This is not really the book for you. Like The Great Circle, this book is set in two different time periods. So in 1899, a man named Peter Winsworth is working on a multi-volume encyclopedic dictionary, and he's on the S's. Now, for various reasons, which we only come to understand little by little, for various reasons, Winsworth decides to add fictitious words and definitions into the dictionary. Now, this is a real thing, and those fictitious words are called mount weasels. And many times in real life, dictionary makers would include these fake words because these mount weasels, because they could then tell if another publisher had stolen the copyright of that dictionary and published it as their own. So mount weasels are very real things. Now, in the present day, we have Peter Winsworth in 1899. In the present day, a young woman named Mallory is interning at the same publishing house, at Swansby's Publishing House. And she is hired to find all the mount weasels that Peter Winsworth put in that book, in the dictionary, and take them out. So how these two stories come together, how these two people who are separated by so much time and obviously never get to meet one another in person, how they interact through the pages of this dictionary is just really, really a delight. It's a book that some people loved and some people disliked. And I found a very positive quote about this book done by a writer who I happen to love, Andrew Sean Greer. And this was his blurb for the book. The Liar's Dictionary is the book I was longing for. So eudaimonical, so felicific and habile, a harlequinade of cachinnation. It's hilarious and smart and charming, and I loved it. Read it. It's the book you're longing for. So there's somebody who loved the book. Here's my favorite negative review, which I think is on Amazon, but could be on Goodreads. Disjointed nonsense. Could not follow the characters and really didn't care. Stopped immediately after hitting a totally chaotic, unfathomable sentence exceeding 200 words, 5 dashes, and commas and double figures. And someone else wrote, the scene of a woman trying to kill a pelican or vice versa came right after the 200+ word sentence. So that was a great place to stop. I actually love books that have sentences that go on and on and on. I'm addicted to dashes and commas and, just this lovely book about words. And it's a great cover. So we can judge it by that cover. So those are all the books today. I hope you find something good in them. And now I'm happy to take questions.
Hi, Nancy.
Hi, Alan.
Real briefly, I'm Alan Whitman. I'm on the board of the Friends of the Library, and it's been my pleasurable task to relay some of the questions you guys have asked, and you can continue to send them in via the chat. So let's see. First of all, are you working on another novel?
Oh my goodness. I would love to be working on another novel, and I am thinking about, it hasn't gotten to the stage of writing anything down. It's still thinking about it. And it's based on, the main character is one of the minor-ish characters in George and Lizzie. So that's what I'm doing.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, we have an audience comment. I also recommend Unsettled Ground by Cassandra Tate about the Whitmans and their killing. No relation to me, by the way. Includes how the National Monument has changed over time. Any knowledge of that or anything to add?
Yes, I would absolutely agree. I looked at that book after I read Blaine Harden's book. And actually, I interviewed Blaine Harden about this book. And you could watch that interview just by Googling Nancy Pearl Blaine Harden. Actually, it should come right up on YouTube.
Oh, very good. Having a hard time managing this screen, so be patient. Oh, have you read any, and I don't know if it's pronounced Sloth House or Slew House novels by Mick Herron? He also writes modern day British spy novels from a different angle. The Gang Who Can't Shoot Straight.
Yes, I love Mick Herron's Slew House novels. These are so Slew House, SLOUGH. Slew House is a building in London, an office, a kind of home house that has been turned into an office building for a group of spies, MI5 spies that have been disgraced. And the characters are so much fun to read about, especially their boss, who makes the most outrageous and outlandish comments and would be hauled up for a hostile workplace if he were here in the United States. And someone once asked Mick Herron how he came up with those things that this guy says. And he says, and Mick Herron said, he just, whenever he was writing those parts, he just thought of the absolutely worst thing that somebody could say at that moment. And that's what this guy said. So the one thing I would say about that series, Mick Herron series, is that they're better read in order, because you really get to know what happened. And the first one many of them, really the young hero of those books is a policeman, an MI5, disgraced MI5 agent called River Cartwright. And the first book explains his disgrace and all of that. The other thing about Mick Herron is that he's a fearless writer, fearless in the sense of creating a character who is, who you just like, when you read what he says, you just go, oh my God, how could he, I don't believe he said that. But also he's one of those writers who understands that death is a part of life, even in fiction. And so doesn't hesitate to kill off characters. And boy, I really admire that a lot.
Well, thank you. And I too am a big John le Carré fan, so I have lots of reads now. Let's see. Here's a question, interesting one. What books would you like to read again for the first time?
Oh my gosh, so many books. I would love to read, since we're talking about John le Carré, Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy again for the first time. I mean, I reread it every couple of years. I listened to it. It's an excellent audio book as well. I would love for the first time, oh my gosh, so many. Lonesome Dove. I would love to read Lonesome Dove for the first time without knowing how it ends. Most of the books that I love, I would love to read for the first time. I think that I would love to read for the first time all those teenage novels that were set in the 50s, the kind of Bobby Sox novels, the novels by Betty Cavanagh and Lenora Mattingly Weber about Beanie Malone. I'd love to read those and be the person that I was when I first discovered those.
Thank you. Let's see. Oh, my daughter just said, I want a book like The Goldfinch or Shantaram that are big and involving. Any ideas?
Well, I think actually The Great Circle would be a good book for that kind of, that is a big and involving book. And I would also suggest who wrote The Goldfinch again? I can't remember her name. Anyway, her second book, not The Secret History, but her second book, which is actually my favorite, is a book that is big and involving. And I'll go back and say Lonesome Dove is a big involving book.
Thank you. Let's see. Oh, were Marjorie Sharp and Angela Throkill contemporaries?
They were contemporaries. I don't know if they knew one another. Although I wouldn't be surprised if they did. There's nothing in the biography of Angela Thirkell that mentions Marjorie Sharp, as far as I can remember. Yes, the Donna Tartt book, thank you, is The Little Friend. And Alan, that's what I would tell your daughter to read.
Okay, that was not my daughter.
Oh, not your daughter. Oh, somebody.
No, I'm just relaying the questions here. That wasn't mine.
I see. Okay, someone's daughter, The Little Friend.
Okay, this is not my question, but I had it. Could you please spell Montweasel?
Yes, Montweazel.
Okay, thank you.
You know, it's sort of like the word mondegreen, Mondegreen, which describes the situation where you mishear a lyric. You know, you mishear a lyric in a song.
Oh,
like, you know, that the song, like, I'm gonna kiss the sky. You know, there's that lyric in and maybe it was the Beatles. And many people hear that as I'm gonna kiss this guy, you know. Anyway, mishearing that sort of thing is called the Mondegreen. So I thought that was interesting too.
One of my favorites is my stepdaughter thought the lyric was "Hold me closer, Tony Danza." Okay, here's a question which I really like. If you love long sentences, do you also favor, as do I, in parens, parenthetical remarks?
I do. I love parentheses. And I have to say that I was asked to, years ago now, I was asked to review a novel, not a novel. I was asked to review a book by Michael Dirda, who writes books and writes reviews for the Washington Post. I was asked to review his new book for the Washington Post, which was a little scary because that's his, I hope that I would like the book. And I loved the book. It was about, his love of books, and it was just so much fun to read. And I wish that I could meet him and go to his house and see all those books. But in my review, I used a lot of parentheses. And I remember when the editor, who I believe back then even was Ron Charles, when Ron Charles wrote back and said, he said, "Oh, great review, but oh, those parentheses," and they took them all out. So I love parentheses. I love M dashes, the long dashes, because that's how people talk. Well, anyway, it's how I talk. I talk with a lot of parentheses, whether I'm writing it down or not.
Thank you. Let's see. Before I forget, I missed this one earlier about back to shadow intelligence. Just ask, is shadow intelligence very violent? I don't read those. It says.
I do not like graphic violence at all. I don't read those kinds of books. In fact, someone recently, a question came up on Twitter, like, what absolutely will you not read in a book? And what I will not, I will stop a book immediately if the first chapter or the introduction is from the point of view of either the person who's going to be murdered or the murderer. So I don't like that kind of violence. To me, Shadow Intelligence had about the same amount of violence as a Jad le Carré book would, which is not that much. And,
not much.
And
Okay.
very, very, very readable.
Thank you. And I think this is the last question I have here. And the writer says, the last time we met in person, you mentioned Amor Towles.
Amor Towles, right.
Towles, thank you. And he was working on a new novel that you're excited about, The Lincoln Highway, published this year. Any thoughts?
Yeah, sometimes you start a book and, like 85% of why we like a book at any particular moment or don't like it is our mood. And when I started Lincoln Highway, which has gotten very good reviews, I was not in the right mood for it. So I can't, say that, oh my gosh, I love that book, because I haven't gotten any further than the first couple of pages. But I see that Linda Johns, one of my former students, and who's a great reader and a great librarian, she says that Lincoln Highway was better on audio than in print. So that was interesting. Can I answer one of the questions that I see? I'm seeing these questions too.
Oh yeah, please. And I missed the second page. So.
Okay, so this one says, last year I enjoyed your speculative fiction selections. Do you recommend some this year? Yeah, the book that a couple of books that I really, speculative fiction that I really enjoyed. One is called The Space Between Worlds. It's a first novel, but it's the author's first name is Micaiah Johnson. The Space Between Worlds, I'd highly recommend that. Then there's a series that I don't remember the author's name. I think 3 books are out now. West Highway. I'm going to try to find that. Is one of those books. And those 2, I think, were the best speculative fiction books that I read this year. Okay. Let's see. Regarding your current list, which would you recommend for a book club? I think most of the books on the list are good for book groups. I definitely recommend Final Revival of Opal and Ned, The Great Circle. I would recommend Leonard and Hungry Paul. I would recommend Murder at the Mission. I would definitely recommend Having and Being Had and Miracle Country. Most of those books I think would be really, really good.
Okay, thanks
for that.
Let's see, somebody just added a question. A couple. Have you read Cloud Cuckoo yet? I guess it's Cuckoo.
Yeah, Cloud Cuckoo Land. That's another book that I have not read. I just cannot get into that. I you know, what I've been hearing from a lot of people is that they're having a lot of still, you know, it's been 18 months, having a lot of trouble finding books that hold their attention. And I've certainly had that, have been in that experience as well.
Okay. Rules of Civility, another Towles novel.
Yeah. So Rules of Civility was Amor's first novel. I loved Rules of Civility. It reminded me a lot of the books by John O'Hara, a writer of the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And yeah, I loved Rules of Civility. And if you're interested in Amor Towles, he is one of the authors that my co-writer Jeff Schwager and I interviewed for our book, The Writer's Library, which is a collection of 20 interviews with 22 writers. One of the that unequal 20 interviews with 22 writers or 21 writers is because we interviewed Michael Chabon and his wife Ayelet Waldman together. So that's a really long, fun interview. And The Writer's Library is coming out in paperback, or it's just out in paperback with, excuse me, a wonderful, wonderful new cover too. So, yes.
This is a quick one. Wordy book is recommended for what age group?
Yeah, you know, I would say like 5 and up.
Oh, okay.
And I would say adults too. I loved that book. It is, I mean, I love Julie Pashkus's art and, you know, the books, the picture books that she writes. But in this book, she's put it all together. And go look at it. It's a book that's hard to resist.
So we've run a little bit over time. I think there's maybe one more question. Your thoughts on?
Okay, just curious. How many books does Nancy read in a month?
Oh my goodness. You know, it all depends. My latest reading has been reading all 30 novels, mysteries in the Jane Haddam mystery series. And I just been, you know, reading those, and in between a few other books. I would say that I do nothing except read, either walking and listening or doing jigsaw puzzles and listening. And my husband really made my reading life possible, except that he's just had a week ago had shoulder replacement surgery. So now I have not been able to read it all because I have to do everything, which is a shock. So
Nancy, thank you. And I'll turn it back over to Vicki.
All right. Well, I'm glad I was finally able to get my computer to cooperate, and congrats to the team for making it work. Thank you so much, Nancy, for joining us today.
Oh, totally my pleasure, Vicki. Thank you, as always, for inviting me.
It's always wonderful to have you. And I have a few words to say. The recording of this program will be available in a few days on our website at www.snowowl.org. And on your screen, you see a couple of slides for more information about Nancy Pearl and the Friends of the Langley Library. Here's the information for Nancy's page and for the Friends of the Library Facebook page. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Jill Edwards with a few words about the Friends.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Nancy, for being here. We just enjoyed that so much. I think I was smiling the whole time. The Friends of the Langley Library is a nonprofit organization that helps fund library programming and improvements. And if you would like to become a member, find out more information, or if you'd like to support us, please visit our Facebook page on the screen or ask any of the library staff for more information. And we'd like to extend a special thank you to WICA, Whidbey Island Center for the Arts, for offering to accommodate our event this year. They've always been incredibly generous to the Friends in hosting us. And thank you to Snow Isle for hosting this event when we decided to move it online. We appreciate everybody who is involved. And I think that's it. It's a wrap. Thank you so much, Nancy, once again, and thank everybody in attendance today. We hope to see you all in person next year. Thanks so much for coming.